Hi, today I'm going to walk you through some tips and some directions for planning lessons for young children in your lab classes. This could be for early childhood arts or science or math, whatever specific topic you're planning for your lab. This information will help you. So first, grab your standards for the class or the age that you are working with so that you can align your plans with the standards. And the standards provide lots of ideas and activities that you can also use to plan. You'll also need your Art as a Way of Learning curriculum framework, because here at Northampton our early childhood is based upon an Art as a Way of Learning approach philosophy. And so you'll use these two documents every time you plan. It will get much easier as you work because you'll get used to what you're planning for. So today I'm going to just give you an example of a plan and how I would go about planning it. So first of all, this lesson plan will be focused on science, and so all I'm going to go do is I'm going to go down to the language. You can see the languages are listed here, and so you'll often find that you are combining or covering more than one area when you're planning, such as language and literacy and visual arts. But when you're in a specific class like early childhood science, you want to make sure that you're really learning how to plan for those experiences. So I'm going to go down here to science. You can see they're all included. And I'm going to make this bigger for a second. Okay, so you'll see that in every aspect of the languages that we're planning, language of science, language of literacy, language of visual arts, there are processes and their elements. And so when you plan your experience, you want to ask yourself, what am I planning for? You might say, I plan for the children to observe and ask questions related to physics when we race cars. So you'll use this language over here on this left side to plan what language of learning you're going to use and how you're going to use that. Then you'll see there's 4 curricular goals. There are 4 curricular goals that are the same for all of the languages of learning, same for visual arts, same for science, same for math, except for they focus on that area. So you'll see here the first one is children represent and express ideas through the language of science. When you're looking at visual arts, you'll see it says through the language of visual arts. So the second thing you're going to think about when you're looking at your planned experience is what language or what curricular goal am I going to hope children are learning. So it could be children represent and express. If you go down here, you'll see children inquire and solve problems. Children connect to family, community, and culture. Or children build relationships and understanding of self. And you'll see underneath here, these are all sorts of ideas that might help you decide how you want to explain what you're going to have children doing. So you might say, for this activity, I'm going to have children inquire and solve scientific problems when they investigate the cars and the ramps that I brought in, and I will hope that they will also experiment with different ways to get the cars to go faster. And so in that way, you've very clearly stated what curricular goal you're going to focus on. And you'll do that for each lesson you plan. So again, you start with what's the language? The language is science, and I hope children will observe and ask questions as they learn about physics to race cars and ramps. And then the curricular goal is going to be children inquire and solve problems when they ... And that will be specific to your experience. Then you're going to make sure that what you're planning is appropriate, necessary for young children based on their needs, interests, and abilities. And in this area, I would go down to, you can see here, one of these areas. So page 42 will give us the beginning of science. And you'll find that other things, other standards might also connect. But it's easy to go and find out what the connection is here when you're planning for a specific thing like cars and ramps. And so this all has to do with living things. This is properties of matter. And let's see, here, participate in a simple investigation. Oh, that's of matter. Oh, here, explore and describe the motion of toys and objects. So you might say this lesson will focus on standard 3.2 PKB1, explore and describe the motion of toys and objects. And then here's some examples of what teachers might do and what you might hope children would do. So those will be the two main tools that you use for all your planning. And all I want to do very briefly is show you what a lesson plan might look like here. This is a filled-in lesson plan. Yours would be blank. You always want to create a title that indicates kind of what you're doing, like children will experiment with cars and ramps, so that your cooperating teacher or myself or another colleague might understand what you're doing. And then, and you can see this is actually for internship, so this has a little more details here, so don't pay attention to that section. But each week you're going to be looking at what did you learn about the children last week when you were interacting. What do they love to do? What do they need to do? What are they interested in? You're going to document that here, because your plan should show some evidence that it relates to what's going on in yellow. Maybe something your teacher is doing, something the group of children are doing, or something the individual focus child you have. So always think about, what am I learning about the children? What am I learning about my focus child? And what am I learning, observing about the teacher? And that should be documented here specifically. And it should change week to week, because children change week to week. And while some things might stay the same, you're going to need to be a keen observer of what else they're interested in or need to learn or are growing in. And then here you'll see the curriculum goal and the language of learning. When I spoke about this a few minutes ago, I was talking about science, and you can see here a similar language. I will be planning for science, that's the language, and what processes or elements, which I showed you in the curriculum manual, will I hope to focus on, so that it's very clear what my goal is. And it's professional, to connect what is appropriate for children to learn with your professional knowledge and teach them that. And then the curricular goal that I chose was to connect with family and culture and represent and express. So you see both of those here. In this case, the student teachers are required to have two connections, and so you can choose to only have one, but it should spell out what's happening in your lesson. You can see here when they discover natural diverse manipulatives such as seashells and buttons, that kind of thing. And then here are standards that this particular lesson focused on. They have 4. You, as you plan, will have 2. You can see how many were in the standards, so you can understand that there's plenty for you to find. And then you want to be thinking about, how is my lesson plan going to consider all the children in my class? You know, what do I know about my kids that might cause me to plan differently, or to offer different materials, or to interact differently, maybe use teaching skills differently, maybe use an iPad to provide another access. So you want to document that here based on the specific lesson. Okay, so that's the planning part of it. And then you'll move on to what are the steps of your lesson. And here is where you list all your materials. If you list a book, it should have an author. If you have a song, it should have an author and a title. It can't just say song about dance or a book about turtles. Think about a substitute coming in and teaching your class, and what would happen if your lesson is not specific. And so you want to first think about, how am I going to hook the kids to want to be involved? The hook is, how are you going to get their attention? Sometimes you set out items. Sometimes you might bring a prop or wear a hat. Sometimes you might sing a song. You might start with a picture. But how will you get them interested? And that's really important, because if you don't have children's interests, then you don't have control of their behavior. And you want to manage your classroom and your lesson smoothly. And then think about, what specific teaching skills and strategies will you want to focus on? Support, direct. How will you support? How will you stretch? Will you ask connecting questions, extending questions? Will you direct by focusing their attention? So you want to clearly state that. And then you want to list your lesson plan steps as if a substitute was going to read them. Could they conduct your lesson plan if you weren't there? And if they can, then you've done a great job. If they can't, then you need to go back and add some things. You might include specific questions that you want to ask because you know they're important to the success of your lesson or understanding what the children have learned. Maybe transitions to move children from one idea or activity to another. So just be very specific, and I encourage you to number them each 1, 2, 3, and so on. At the end, you're going to assess, this is after your lesson plan is done, how did the children learn based on what you planned. So you'll go back up to your plan and you'll say, I planned these 2 things. So when you talk about this at the bottom, you will say the children met the goals that I had. They connected to family and culture by doing this. I could tell that they did this at home, or they understood this, and my focus child did this. They also learned through the languages of science because they observed, they asked questions, so-and-so said this. So you want to use this language, and you want to give specific examples of what the children did, and then also talk about how they did or did not meet some of the standards. They did explore characteristics of living things. Sammy said this, Susie said this, and here's what they did at the end. And so at the very end, it's clear what your children learned. And then you'll submit a photo of their completed work or something to show the results of your lesson. And at the very end is your reflection of you. What teaching skills and strategies did you do well? And this is where you must use a teaching skill, support, direct, stimulate, plan, and the strategies. You can't just say I supported by saying good job, but what strategies did you use? How did you observe the children well? So include at least 2 teaching skills and strategies you did well, and examples that tell how you did that. I did this, and this is what I said, and this is why it was a good idea. And when you talk about future work, it's never okay to say, I need to work on all of them. That's really hard to go back and measure. That's not a plan. So what you want to specifically look back on your lesson and say, you know what? I think I want to really kind of grow in the area of stimulate, because I didn't really have a good hook or introduction and the kids weren't as interested right away. So I want to stimulate by preparing an aesthetic environment, by having more materials, and very clearly spell that out. Don't just say, I'm going to work on all my skills, but make it measurable so you can look back and be like, yep, my next lesson plan, I did provide a more prepared environment and specific materials, all organized, and the response to the kids. So each time you talk about where you want to grow, you should be kind of isolating a plan for how you could do that next week and then reflecting back on that. So that in a nutshell is how to plan, and I hope this helps you as you go forward to really plan well and really be excited about what you're doing with kids.